The federal Liberals have managed to obtain a majority government in the House of Commons, sweeping 3 by-elections last night. Combine that with the 5 floor crossers they've attracted, and there might not be a federal election until 2029. Our Mackenzie Gray joins us now from Ottawa to break it all down for us. So, Mac, take us through these results that happened last night. What stood out to you?
Fairly comprehensive victories by the Liberals. As we discussed yesterday, the 2 ridings in Toronto, there was really no surprise there. The Liberals were going to get well north of 50% in those ridings. That's what played out in that situation there, able to call those ridings about 2 hours after the polls closed at 8:30 Eastern time. But it was in Terrebonne, the riding in Quebec, just outside of the island of Montreal, that was much closer and was the one that I think, in terms of the results, we were looking at a little bit more. A true two-way race between the Bloc and the Liberals. The Liberals squeaking out by about 700 votes. And it's tough pill to swallow for the Bloc. They actually increased their vote share by over 7%. This is a riding that they've held for an extended period of time. The Liberals, outside of winning it by 1 vote in 2025, had not had it since 1980. So a really big win for the Liberals and Mark Carney there. But when you look at the vote share overall, every party outside of the Conservatives actually increased the number of votes they got. The Conservatives, particularly in Terrebonne, it was a brutal showing for them. They got around 18% in the 2025 election. They got 3% last night. And overall, if you combine the vote share from all 3 by-elections relative to where they were in 2025, they're down about 13%. So a really tough night for Pierre Poilievre on a multitude of levels. And if you're Mark Carney, now you've got a little bit of breathing room. You've got a majority by a couple of seats in the House of Commons, meaning that you can kind of execute things how you want and have a little bit of breathing room in terms of being able to not have to negotiate with the opposition party so much.
All right, so Mac, tell us more about how this does change the political calculus for Mark Carney and the Liberals.
It certainly will change it quite a bit. As you mentioned in the intro, 2029 is when the next election kind of would be scheduled. Of course, Mr. Carney could go earlier than that if he walks over to Rideau Hall and talks to the Governor General. It doesn't seem like the Liberals have much of an intention of doing that at this point in time. Of course, the key thing is that they now have a majority in the House of Commons. They can push through legislation. They can also bring forward closure motions. That basically says, hey, we're going to debate this for X number of hours. After that point, then boom, we're moving to votes on that. That means that there can't really be filibusters from the opposition parties if the Liberals want to employ that tactic. That can move things through very quickly. Of course, there are concerns about the democratic process associated with that. We'll see how much Mark Carney is willing to use those tools at his disposal if he so chooses. Of course, at committees too, that's very important right now. The Bloc and the Conservatives and a couple of different committees have kind of ganged up together to make life more difficult for the Liberals. That's not going to happen in the future with the Liberals having a majority on these committees. They can push things through as they want. Another thing too, we do a lot of hits and I chat with you a lot in different parts of the world. Very excited and lucky to get to go in those places. Mr. Carney loves to travel, and that's a big part of what he has said that he wants to do. He wants to go diversify Canadian trade. There were concerns, and Mr. Carney said this in some meetings with the cameras there, that he wasn't able to bring certain people and he wasn't able to do as much travel as he wanted because of the minority situation in the House of Commons. I would bet that this increases the amount of travel that he does, not having to worry about Parliament as much. So a multitude of different things. But now, we've heard from the Prime Minister that he wants to build at speeds never seen before. He wants to get things done very quickly. He doesn't have many excuses now. He needs to be able to execute on that vision because he's got a majority in the House of Commons. But we should point out, too, that there are probably going to be at least 2 other Liberals that quit in relatively short order. Nathan Erskine-Smith, a Toronto MP, he said he wants to run in a provincial by-election and then run for the Ontario Liberal leadership. Jonathan Wilkinson, the former Natural Resources Minister, for many months now has been rumored to be getting a diplomatic appointment in Europe. That has yet to happen. So we are expecting that there's going to be 2 other by-elections that come forward. And there could be other seats that come up for grabs too. So it's a very slim majority right now that could be fluctuating depending on what happens with a couple of MPs. We know those 2 from the Liberals. There could be NDP members and other Conservative members too that resign as well.
So, Mac, these are obviously not the results that Pierre Poilievre wanted. Where does this put him? And can we expect there to be more defections from the Conservatives?
I think there's kind of 2 schools of thought on what's happening with Mr. Poilievre. If you're taking the more positive approach from Mr. Poilievre, he might actually be happy with the Liberals getting a majority last night. We saw what happened with the budget vote where there were Conservative members, pretending they didn't know how to use their phones and vote in the House of Commons and running in at the last second and people not showing up. They were turning themselves into pretzels to basically say, we don't like the government, we want to vote against the budget, but we actually don't want an election. You know, the Conservatives don't have to worry about that anymore. They can be as aggressive as they'd like or more conciliatory as they like, depending on which tone they want to take in terms of dealing with the government. And Mr. Poilievre has some runway now. You know, we look at the polling data from a number of different firms. The split between Mr. Carney's personal popularity and Mr. Poilievre's popularity is massive. If the Conservatives under Mr. Poilievre, if he is the leader in the next election, and he said last night again that he plans to be that person, they're going to need to close that gap. They are going to need to hope that Mr. Carney has some mistakes and fumbles and he can bring his personal popularity back down. If they can do that, then the Conservatives are going to be in a better position. There is a school of thought that they have more runway to be able to execute those things now, kind of reinvent Mr. Poilievre, try and focus on different things, and gives them some breathing room to be able to deal with these things.
All right, it's an interesting time in Canadian politics. That is Global's Mackenzie Gray joining us from the nation's capital. Thank you, Mac.